What kind of person demands a flag be taken down in a place where blood stains the earth it flies over? Karen Miller, a civilian contractor with a clipboard and a permanent scowl, stormed into the dusty outpost like she owned it. Her sneakers crunched on the gravel, kicking up clouds of sand as she marched toward the flagpole in the center of the base. The American flag, frayed at the edges, snapped in the dry desert wind. To her, it was an eyesore, a symbol of tacky patriotism that didn't belong in her carefully curated world of regulations and order. She'd been sent to this remote military outpost in a war-torn region to oversee logistics, but to Karen, the flag was a personal affront. She'd heard the soldiers talk about it with reverence, seen them saluted at dawn, and it grated on her nerves. "This isn't some backyard barbecue," she muttered, her voice sharp as she adjusted her ill-fitting khaki vest. "Flags don't get to fly year-round just because you feel like it." The outpost was a skeleton of a place, a cluster of tents and concrete barriers surrounded by endless dunes. The soldiers stationed there, a tight-knit group of 4, had been holding the line for months, their faces weathered by sun and stress. They called the flag Old Glory, a nickname that made Karen roll her eyes. To her, it was just fabric, a bureaucratic oversight that violated some obscure rule she'd dug up from her manual. She'd already written 3 complaints about the soldiers' unprofessional behavior, leaving muddy boots in the mess hall, laughing too loudly during briefings. But the flag? That was her breaking point. She stood before it now, hands on her hips, her round face flushed with indignation. "This comes down today," she barked, loud enough for the entire base to hear. "I'm filing a formal complaint with the Department of Defense if it's not gone by sundown." Sergeant Javier Ruiz, a wiry man with tired eyes and a scar across his jaw, stepped forward. He'd seen worse than Karen insurgents, ambushes, the kind of chaos that left men broken, but her audacity hit differently. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low but firm, "that flag's been up since we lost 3 men holding this post. It's not going anywhere." Karen's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sneer. "You don't get to decide that, Sergeant. I'm in charge of compliance here, and I say it's a violation." The other soldiers, Corporal Emily Chun, Private Marcus Tate, and Specialist Liam Brooks, stood behind Ruiz, their silence heavy with defiance. The air crackled with tension, the kind that precedes a storm no one sees coming. Karen didn't back down. She never did. Back home, she'd been the terror of her neighborhood HOA, the kind of woman who measured lawn grass with a ruler and sent certified letters over unapproved mailbox colors. This was her domain, her battlefield, and she wielded her authority like a weapon. "You think you're heroes because you're out here playing soldier?" she snapped, her voice dripping with contempt. "I've dealt with worse than you. I'll have this whole base written up." Ruiz's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. He'd heard stories of people like Karen, civilians who came to war zones with egos bigger than the missiles they dodged. But this was the first time he'd seen one in action, and it felt like a betrayal deeper than any enemy fire. The soldiers had their own reasons for protecting the flag. For Ruiz, it was a promise to his fallen brother, a kid from Texas who died in his arms during an ambush. For Chun, it was a reminder of her grandfather, a Vietnam vet who'd taught her what sacrifice meant. Tate and Brooks, younger but no less resolute, saw it as a tether to the home they hadn't seen in months. Karen didn't know any of this, didn't care to. She saw their defiance as insubordination, a challenge to her authority. "You'll regret this," she said, turning on her heel and storming back to her air-conditioned trailer. She was already drafting her complaint, her fingers itching to type the words that would bury these soldiers in paperwork. But something shifted that afternoon. As Karen typed furiously, a low rumble echoed across the base. A supply convoy had been hit a mile out, and the soldiers were scrambling to respond. Ruiz led the team, leaving Karen alone with her laptop and her rage. She didn't notice the way the flag caught the light as the sun dipped low, casting a shadow over the blood-stained ground. She didn't know the story of the men who died to keep that flag flying, or the promise it held for those still fighting. All she saw was a rule broken, a line crossed, and she was determined to make them pay. The twist came quietly, almost unnoticed. While Karen was drafting her complaint, she found an email buried in her inbox, one she'd overlooked in her haste to assert control. It was from the base commander, sent weeks ago, authorizing the flag to fly year-round as a tribute to the fallen. It wasn't just a flag. It was a memorial, sanctioned by the highest authority on the base. Karen's face paled as she read the words, her certainty crumbling. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. She deleted the email, her hands shaking. No one would know. She'd make sure of it. The soldiers returned that evening, dusty and bruised but alive. The convoy attack had been a close call, and the air was thick with exhaustion. Karen waited for them at the flagpole, her clipboard clutched like a shield. "I've drafted the complaint," she announced, her voice cutting through the dusk. "You'll hear from the DOD by next week." Ruiz stared at her, his eyes hard as flint. "You're making a mistake, ma'am," he said. "That flag's not just ours. It's theirs." He gestured to the ground, where the ghosts of the fallen seemed to linger. Karen scoffed, but something in his tone made her pause. For the first time, she felt a flicker of doubt, a crack in her armor of self-righteousness. The standoff grew heavier as the days passed. Karen's complaint was sent, a digital missile aimed at the soldiers' morale. She'd cited every regulation she could find, twisting words to paint the flag as a symbol of insubordination. The soldiers, meanwhile, carried on with their duties, patrols, repairs, the endless grind of survival in a war zone. But the flag remained, a silent rebellion against her authority. Karen watched it from her trailer window, her resentment festering. She'd won battles like this before against neighbors, co-workers, anyone who dared defy her. This would be no different, or so she thought. The soldiers weren't idle. Ruiz, ever the tactician, had contacts back at headquarters. He'd sent a quiet inquiry about Karen's complaint, sensing something off about her confidence. Chan, with her knack for details, dug into the base's records, piecing together the flag's history. They learned it had been raised after a brutal firefight when the outpost was nearly overrun. 3 soldiers had died defending it, their names etched on a plaque hidden beneath the flagpole. The discovery hit the team hard, but it also steeled their resolve. "She doesn't get it," Chan said one night, her voice low as they sat around a flickering lantern. "She thinks it's about rules. It's about them." Karen, oblivious to the soldiers' quiet rebellion, grew bolder. She started issuing orders unrelated to her role, demanding the soldiers clean the mess hall to her standards, criticizing their uniforms, even questioning their patrol schedules. Her voice was a constant drone, a reminder of her presence. The soldiers endured it, but the tension was a live wire, sparking with every word she spoke. Then came the twist that turned the tide. Chun, combing through old communications, found a backup of the deleted email, the one authorizing the flag. It had been archived on a shared server Karen didn't know existed. The soldiers had their proof, and they weren't about to let it go. The confrontation came on a blistering afternoon, the sun a merciless weight on the outpost. Karen stood by the flagpole, her clipboard now a prop in her one-woman show of authority. "I've had enough," she declared, her voice carrying over the hum of a distant generator. "This flag comes down now, or I'll have you all court-martialed." The soldiers, gathered in a loose semicircle, didn't move. Ruiz stepped forward, holding a printout of the email. "You might want to read this first," he said, his tone calm but unyielding. Karen's eyes flicked to the paper, and for a moment her mask slipped. She knew what it was. She knew she'd been caught. But Karen was nothing if not stubborn. "This doesn't change anything," she snapped, though her voice wavered. "I'm still filing charges. You can't intimidate me." The soldiers exchanged glances, their silence louder than her words. Tate, the youngest, spoke up, his voice raw with emotion. "You're standing on their graves, ma'am. You're spitting on them." The accusation hit like a grenade, and Karen flinched. For the first time, she saw the plaque at the base of the flagpole, the names etched in stark relief. She hadn't noticed it before, hadn't cared to. The weight of her ignorance pressed down on her, but she pushed it away, clinging to her anger like a lifeline. The soldiers didn't back down. They couldn't. The flag wasn't just fabric. It was a promise, a vow to honor the fallen. Karen's threat to sue, to tear it down, was an attack on something deeper than regulations. It was personal. Ruiz took a step closer, his voice steady but laced with fire. You want to take this to court? Go ahead. But you'll be explaining why you tried to erase a memorial to men who died for this ground. Karen's face twisted, her confidence crumbling under the weight of his words. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. The soldiers stood united, their eyes burning with a quiet fury that made her feel small. The base commander arrived the next day, summoned by Ruiz's inquiry. He was a grizzled veteran, his face lined with years of hard decisions. He'd seen the email, knew the flag's purpose. When he called Karen into his office, she tried to spin her story, but the evidence was ironclad. The commander's voice was low, controlled, but it cut through her excuses like a blade. You deleted an official communication, he said. You tried to undermine a memorial. Do you have any idea what that means out here? Karen stammered, her usual bravado gone. She hadn't expected this, hadn't realized the flag's weight until it was too late. The soldiers watched from a distance as Karen packed her things. Her trailer emptied under the commander's orders. She'd been relieved of her duties, her contract terminated. The legal threat she'd wielded so confidently was now a noose around her own neck. The commander had already notified her superiors, and whispers of an investigation followed her like a shadow. The flag, untouched, continued to fly, its frayed edges catching the wind. For the soldiers, it was a victory, but not one they celebrated. They didn't need to. The flag was still there, and that was enough. Karen's departure was quiet, a stark contrast to her arrival. She left the outpost in a dusty jeep, her face a mask of humiliation and defiance. The soldiers didn't watch her go. They were too busy, too focused on the work that kept them alive. But the weight of her actions lingered, a reminder of how far entitlement could stretch, even in a place where survival demanded unity. The flag stood tall, its colors faded but unyielding, a testament to the men who'd given everything to keep it flying. For the soldiers, it was a symbol of resilience, a promise to carry on no matter the cost. Back home, Karen tried to rebuild her narrative. She told friends and former colleagues a watered-down version of the story, painting herself as the victim of a rogue military unit. But the truth had a way of leaking out. The investigation into her conduct grew, fueled by the commander's report and the soldiers' testimonies. Her name became a cautionary tale, whispered in offices and break rooms. She'd overstepped, underestimated the power of what she'd tried to destroy. The flag wasn't just fabric. It was a story, a sacrifice, and she'd been foolish enough to think she could erase it with a complaint. The soldiers, meanwhile, found strength in the aftermath. Ruiz, Chen, Tate, and Brooks carried the weight of their fallen comrades. But they also carried hope. They wrote letters home, telling their families about the flag, about the fight to keep it flying. Chen's grandfather, the Vietnam vet, cried when he read her letter, proud of the legacy she was carrying forward. Tate, who'd always been the quiet one, started sketching the flag in his journal, each stroke a tribute to the men they'd lost. Brooks, the joker of the group, found himself praying at night, something he hadn't done since childhood. The flag had become their anchor, a reminder that some things were worth fighting for, even against someone like Karen. Months later, a small ceremony was held at the outpost. The commander unveiled a new plaque, larger than the last, with the names of the fallen etched in bold letters. The soldiers stood in formation, their faces solemn but proud. The flag, weathered but unbroken, snapped in the wind above them. A young officer read a letter from one of the fallen soldiers' families, thanking the team for honoring their son's memory. There was no mention of Karen, no need to. She was a footnote, a fleeting shadow in a story much bigger than her. The lesson wasn't lost on those who heard the story. In a world quick to tear down, to demand compliance over compassion, the soldiers' stand was a quiet rebellion. They'd faced an enemy not of bullets or bombs, but of arrogance and ignorance, and they'd won. Not with fists or guns, but with truth and resolve. The flag still flew not because of rules or regulations, but because it meant something. Carried the weight of sacrifice, of loss, of hope. And in its shadow, the soldiers found the strength to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep believing in something greater than themselves. For those who passed through that outpost, the flag remains a beacon. It's a reminder that even in the darkest places, where war and loss carve deep scars, there's room for honor, for unity, for something worth defending. Karen's story faded, but the flags endured, its colors a quiet promise that some battles are worth fighting, no matter how small they seem. And for every soldier who salutes it, for every soul who pauses to read the names at its base, it's a call to rise above, to stand for something bigger, to never let the Karens of the world dim the light of what matters most.